Welcome back to both of you. We're going to kick off with a front page that kind of really sums up the huge stories of yesterday. Rest in peace is their very clever headline there, referring to the fact that obviously we saw Pope Francis laid to rest, but ahead of that service, we understood afterwards that this meeting had taken place on the right-hand side. But the two issues really worth talking about. Let's start off talking about the funeral itself, Jade, because, I mean, an extraordinary moment and obviously of great meaning for millions of Catholics worldwide, but an incredible spectacle as well there in Rome.
Yeah, some remarkable imagery coming from the Vatican, actually, with hundreds of thousands of people, with an audience sort of spanning both world leaders through to very ordinary people, which shows just the scope of his message about peace and reform, which obviously contributes to this fascinating dual imagery of sort of his word being taken almost very literally. But yeah, obviously massive ceremony taking place from the Vatican with some unbelievably beautiful imagery.
That's right, and his reputation and his his wish to lead a humble life, despite the seniority of his office, was sort of reflected in many of the decisions made around the funeral. Not least, as Jade was referring to there, the fact that there were people who were homeless and there were migrants who were invited to the service as well, sitting in the same space as these 50 world leaders that had arrived.
Yeah, that's right. Pope Francis will really be remembered as a more progressive Catholic leader. He was very quick to always express sympathy and empathy for more vulnerable groups in society, for the likes of the poor or for the likes of refugees. Not to everyone's satisfaction, by the way. A lot of people obviously welcomed that. They welcomed his stronger commitment to progressing the church when it came to LGBT plus rights. But again, within the sort of Catholic community, there's obviously a bit of tension between that and the more right-wing flank who want to stick to tradition. So it will be interesting to see who wins that battle in the conclave to be his successor, whether it's someone who wants to continue in Pope Francis' tradition of, taking the more empathetic or more a progressive view, or whether someone who wants to sort of strip back to the more traditional Catholic conservatism.
And his sympathy for migrants also reflected in the service as well, which might have been slightly uncomfortable for the likes of Donald Trump, for example, sitting there in the front row of world leaders.
It's fascinating, really, because obviously the Catholic Church has such an influence, not just on its members, but on politics, on discourse, right? So it'll be interesting to see if the conclave goes in the same direction as world politics seems to be going in, this sort of strongman, alt-right type of politics, or whether it sort of reflects what Pope Francis tried to carry on.
Yeah, migration's such a big feature in so many elections around the world.
Absolutely.
So the other half of the story here was this incredible image that was released after the service of a moment that had happened before the service got underway inside St. Peter's Basilica. And just the body language is incredible, the kind of intimacy of the two men, President Zelensky of Ukraine, of course, and President Trump, eyeball to eyeball for the first time since that explosive White House meeting.
Yeah, and what a striking contrast between the two meetings. I mean, who can forget that really uncomfortable scene in the Oval Office where you had J.D. Vance sort of berating Zelensky over, of all the big issues going on, what he was wearing, not being grateful enough, and that entire meeting descending into sort of a bitter war of words. Contrast that with this beautiful backdrop of Vatican City and the much more calm and peaceful interaction between the pair. It was almost sort of as if Pope Francis from the grave had called them to this scene and said, look, you're in this holy space. We need to strip this back. We need to think about the values of peace and calm and finding a way forward. But whether that actually transpires beyond the walls of Vatican City is another question. And we know that even though Trump in the past few days has become more agitated with Putin and his absolute refusal to make any sort of concessions that could make a ceasefire in Ukraine possible, he does have a tendency to change his mind all the time and go from berating one leader to the other. So even though this meeting did end with some warmer words for Ukraine and some more harsh realities for Putin, that could flip back at any moment. So let's see.
Well, yeah, how do you see this, Jade? We did get Donald Trump putting a post on social media afterwards saying about President Putin, it makes me think he doesn't want to stop the war. He's just tapping me along. Do you feel this could be a turning point?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because to your point, Trump is a character who's heavily influenced by his own ego in a way. And this more reflects less of a change in attitude on the actual strategic point of the war and more so in the fact that he feels that Putin has done him a disservice. So I wonder if it's actually a reflection on his personal relationships with the two men rather than his actual view of how the war is going. So it'd be interesting to see if actually Putin's maybe taken a step too far and actually this is a turning point, but more so about Trump's character rather than the war itself.
OK, let's move on and take our viewers to The Express. This is an article inside Noah that you've picked out. And with the local elections looming, the first test for the party since the general election, Kemi Badenoch is over a lot of the papers, isn't she?
Yes, she is, and perhaps not for reasons that would make her staff in Tory HQ quite happy. Like Labour, the Tories are struggling to make an impact. Now, no doubt a lot of that will be down to Kemi's decision to not have a comprehensive policy platform until a general election come 2029. But this article more hones in on the issue of personality politics and effectively says, look, Kemi doesn't have this big charisma that we see in the likes of Nigel Farage, her main competitor on the right. Kemi is definitely not on the same level of as Farage when it comes to personality and character. But I think the jury is out on whether that big personality is what the electorate wants, perhaps after seeing what's happening in the US or in the post-Boris Johnson era. The jury's still out on that. But with that being said, a lot of people are attracted to big personality politics. If you ask a lot of Reform voters what they like about Reform's policy platform, they don't really have many super specifics, but they like what Nigel's saying. They like the sort of direction he's going in. They understand he wants to tackle the small boats crisis. They understand he's sceptical about high taxes, for instance. So you can get a long way by having a lot of charisma, and this report is basically saying Kemi doesn't have enough of it.
Yeah, it's quite interesting some of the names they pick out as examples of who's done well as far as popular figures. They pick out the Argentinian leader, Javier Milei, who is kind of the images people might remember of him brandishing a chainsaw, talking about how he's going to slash state spending, for example. I mean, what do you make of that kind of suggestion?
I wonder if it's a bit of a mistranslation of how we understand British politics, right? Farage is a big character, but he's also inherently quite British in his mannerisms. Yes. He won't go around with a chainsaw, right?
That's right.
So I wonder if we're trying to almost Americanise British politics when we talk about big personalities. We are not fans, as a general public, of the likes of Trump, of the likes of Musk. Actually, that doesn't really appeal to the British psyche. So I wonder if actually, yes, the radical politics of Reform might be of interest to these voters, but I don't necessarily think that those big personalities are particularly British.
OK, let's try and rattle through a couple more stories. AI doc notes. This, Jade, is something you've picked out in the Sunday Mirror.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting one. So guidance released today will encourage GPs and hospitals to use AI tools to reduce down their paperwork. So things like letters, things like writing letters, writing clinical notes should be handed over to AI so that they get more face-to-face time with their patients. It's sort of this wider interest that, well, the whole government has really on AI and how it can be used in the public sphere to increase efficiency, to reduce costs. But it's quite an interesting one because it was post a pilot scheme that suggested actually it does boost the ability of doctors, but simultaneously. It's obviously more to be said about sort of, well, what kind of AI tools would be used? Would it be a ChatGPT model that's used in GP practices? So interesting time for the government on how it engages with the AI debate.
Yeah, and the government obviously keen to stress some of the advantages of AI, but if they look at the Daily Star on Sunday today, there's the sort of the other side of the debate where people are sceptical and feel that some aspects of it could be potentially dangerous. What's the point? I mean, as usual, they're having a lot of fun with this story. AI turning us into plonkers, they say. What's their point?
So I think when it comes to AI, whether we can have a debate about the ethics of whether it should have got to the advanced stage it's at now or not, but I think that debate is a bit pointless because we are here. The AI race is in full swing and the economy will only suffer, government will only suffer if we do not embrace it. Now, the question going forward is how we embrace it. So I am not worried about AI making us dumber, but I think the big questions around AI at the moment are perhaps about how they use other people's work and copyright issues to train their models.
Oh, that's such a big issue. We haven't got time to know.
That's a whole other kettle of fish.
We are out of time. Really good to have your company, both of you, this morning. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
We arrive